This is the story of a wound that did not stop, with people who drank the water. Camp Lejeune. It is the story of a legacy carried in the blood. The born to legal gap, epigenetics, Camp Lejeune, and the pursuit of true justice, if that's even a thing anymore. For more than 30 years, from 1953 to 1987, the water at Camp Lejeune was poisoned with TCE, PCE, benzene, and vinyl chloride, not to mention basically 70 VOCs and more, plus metals. The recognized victims are the veterans and residents who developed adult cancers and a multitude of other health issues. They are many. But there is a hidden legacy: the fetuses, the miscarriages, and the children whose lives were shaped before birth. The ATSDR found that babies exposed in the womb faced 4 times the risk of neural tube defects and other issues. The Navy covered it up. The Navy hospital knew when these fetuses were being developed, what happened, and what they did with them. Unfortunately, many documents were lost or otherwise. Who knows? At Camp Lejeune, there is a cemetery that families came to call Baby Heaven. Beneath those small gravestones lie babies born with a multitude of health issues, including leukemia, babies born without a fully formed skull, babies born with defects no parent should ever have to witness. But they did, and it was covered up. Thousands of pregnancies ended in loss: first term, second term, third, and stillbirths. These are not statistics. They were lives cut short before they could begin. What makes any of that right when it was covered up for decades? Today's law, the Camp Lejeune Justice Act, requires that a person physically lived or worked on the base for at least 30 days. But that standard's bound to a place and a moment in time. It ignores biological reality. A child conceived off base or born years later can carry the toxic burden in their bloodline and still be shut out by geography. Please make that make sense. It actually makes no sense. These children have suffered alongside their parents that they were born to. Unfortunately, this has all been masked. The harm reaches deeper than the womb. A female infant develops her entire lifelong supply of eggs while she is still inside her mother. So when a pregnant woman drank that water, her grandchild's cellular foundation was already bathed in carcinogens. And for fathers, the stem cells that produce sperm are exposed and altered too. The damage was written into the source. Not to mention, many Marines married each other. It's unfathomable that this was covered up for so long. The family registry that the VA has set in place has disease types. However, that family registry form will only allow someone to go back so long in data to be able to get reimbursed for the damages if they can prove it. Not to mention, during Secretary McDonald's time, there were a full list of disease types, and only some of those disease types on the veteran side moved over to presumptive. All the family registry disease types were supposed to have moved over to the presumptive side within the VA, meaning that if you were there and it's on the presumptive side, you would not have to further prove. That has not happened. Those disease types have not fully moved over to the presumptive side. That also is unfathomable. It's disgusting. And someone needs to pay attention to the situation. The form itself states born on the base versus born to, TO, to the contaminated. Far too long, or for too long, the assumption has been that toxic exposure only causes immediate illness. The reality is different. Chemicals like TCE, PCE, benzene, and the others cause epigenetic changes. They alter how our genes are switched on and off. Think of it this way: the genetic code is the hardware, and it's broken, but epigenetic markers are the software, turning harmful traits up and healthy ones down. And that altered software is passed to the next generation. Think about that. This goes deep. Not to mention, benzene was already listed under OSHA guidelines as a serious contaminant. And that went way prior in research, prior to the ATSDR CDC involvement. But yet, we needed more research for decades, while entire families have been wiped out, while fetuses have been lost, and the government complains about the reproduction and people not having enough children through time. The government affected those numbers, clearly, by the huge cover up. Then you have the fact that we have for abortion, not for abortion, battles in this country. It's amazing that these fetuses were actually aborted unknowingly to the parents via toxic water. Isn't that a crime? We are not guessing. A 2021 study by Taylor Abernathy investigated the multi-generational and transgenerational toxicity of TCE using zebrafish. Why zebrafish? They share up to 80% of their genome with humans. They are the gold standard for this kind of research. And because they reproduce outside the body, scientists can cleanly separate one generation from the next. How interesting. Multi-generational toxicity, the F1 progeny. In the first generation, the offspring's developing cells were directly exposed to TCE inside the parent. The findings were clear: altered physical development in the head, jaw, and eyes, a significantly increased heart rate, and changes in how they moved and behaved. The takeaway is undeniable. Direct exposure to just TCE permanently alters the development of the child. Let us go back to the ATSDR CDC meetings. There was one, Dr. Sarah Blossom, that actually hit on the topic of what TCE can do and is known to do to autoimmune systems. Transgenerational toxicity, the F2 breakthrough. Then came the breakthrough. The second generation had zero direct exposure to TCE. None. Nothing. And yet the damage remained: altered body proportions, a significantly changed heart rate, and persistent changes in movement and behavior. The conclusion is impossible to ignore. Toxicity is inherited. The harm echoes through the bloodline, proving the truth of the born to claim. Think Vietnam and Agent Orange. How many years has the United States government paid attention to Vietnam and the Agent Orange mess and the cleanup and funded other things? But yet, veterans and their families are still fighting decades later, and the DOJ and the Navy continue to throw a barrage of documents against their claims? Please make it make sense. Law versus biology, the chasm. This is the gap we must close. The current law is bound to a location, demands physical exposure, and stops at one person who is there. But biology follows the lineage. It crosses state lines through the DNA. It passes down through epigenetic inheritance. And it reaches all the way to the grandchildren. Unbelievable. Restoring dignity, standalone wrongful death claims. A child lost to this water was never to be filed away as a medical complication of the mother. Right now, a miscarriage isn't recognized for the loss it truly is. These lives deserve their own standing, a standalone wrongful death claim, a separate estate that honors the individual life taken by the toxic water. Not to mention the cover up, a true crime. Who knew? Not only that, who knew to file claims when they left the base? They weren't told. It wasn't entered into the record. The law states that you must make a connection on the VA side back to your service record book. But they didn't put it in the record book that they knew about the toxic water, that they knew the EPA of North Carolina was doing studies at the time, at least in the 80s when people left that base. So the first filing date for a claim actually should be a mute issue. The tolling law within the VA should not apply. This also is disgusting. Redefining standing, the Born to mandate. So here's the mandate. Legal standing should follow the bloodline, not the zip code. Any child born to a contaminated parent, no matter where they were born, no matter what year, carries the toxic footprint of Camp Lejeune. Lawmakers and courts must align the legal timeline with the biological one so that justice reaches every generation this water has harmed. The justice that follows the bloodline. We cannot apply a 20th century map to a 21st century truth. From the gravestones of baby heaven to the data of modern science, the answer is undeniable. The legacy of Camp Lejeune is written in the DNA, and justice must be written the exact same way. Why would we not for generations that were poisoned? You must ask yourself this.